morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Maybe. Hello, come on. I know it's first thing in the morning. Perhaps some of you, maybe we're a little bit caffeine light to start off with, but we can have a little bit of fun. So welcome to this first session of the morning. My name's Lavelda Vincenzi. I'm going to be your moderator on this particular stage. This session is all about unwavering ambition, the private sector in a shifting geopolitical landscape. So in this session, we're going to explore one powerful question. In a world that is defined by disruption, how does ambition continue to hold steady? We're facing geopolitical turbulence, economic strain, and a growing public pressure for organizations to lead differently. But alongside all of this complexity, we have opportunity. An opportunity for resilience, opportunity for rethinking what partnerships can look like in the future, and for climate action to build in a way that is long-lasting and thinks beyond short-termism. So we'll be exploring how businesses, how institutions, and how leaders are navigating in this moment. What's changing? What are they keeping? And more importantly, what does it really take nowadays to lead with purpose? So to open this session, we're going to be joined by somebody who's helped shape the conversation globally, a systems thinker who is challenging short-termism and an advocate for long-term regeneration in leadership. Please welcome to the stage the co-president of the Club of Rome and one of the world's leading voices on sustainability, policy, and system change, Sandrine Dixson-Declève.
Okay, first of all, I'm so pleased that you're here, because I thought I was going to be doing this alone. I'm going to get you all to stand up, if you may. We're going to do a bit of a standing meditation, but it's not going to be so meditative, but it's going to set the tone. So I all want you to close your eyes and visualize that you are walking down a street. And you're not hearing so much noise because actually there are quite a few electric vehicles that are driving by. As you walk down this street, however, all of a sudden you see in front of you a person who jumps out of an autonomous vehicle or an Uber into a shop and steals about $1,000 worth of goods. And you're thinking, oh my God, where am I? And then you continue and you stumble over something and you realize that it's a homeless person. And then you continue and you see that that homeless person is actually using drugs, using heroin, and it's all around them. And you're wondering, where am I? Where is this horrible, dystopian place that I have found myself in? And now you can open your eyes. Does anyone know where you are? Anyone hedge a guess? Call it out. Okay, Aaron, do you know where you are? San Francisco. San Francisco, and this is why I want to talk to you today about what does it mean to have unwavering ambition, because San Francisco in the 80s is where I grew up. And in the 80s, the unwavering ambition, and yes, you can please sit down, was about making profit. The unwavering ambition was focused on ensuring that actually individual companies could make as much money as they possibly could through the dot-com boom. What happened is a housing crisis. What happened is the largest amount of homeless. What happened is mental illness. Because what started to happen is the chasm between those that had money and those that did not got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if we're talking about unwavering ambition in today's world, we're talking about, do we continue to grow this dystopia? Or do we actually use this as the fastest, greatest, positive economic transition in history? Through mass movements and political progress, not regression. By looking at market forces and technological forces in a very different way for people, planet, and prosperity. Not just to look at zero carbon, because some of the interest in San Francisco and the Bay Area was about technology for zero carbon, but they forgot a big factor: poverty, inequality, wealth distribution. So the fact of the matter is that my 3 Ps, my vision of change, has been around how do we shift from profit, power, and patriarchy. And apologies, those men that are in the room, because I'm sure that not all of you are suffering from the penis effect, but we do see that the tech bro brotherhood is. And the fact of the matter is that we need to shift to people, planet, and prosperity. So what does that look like? That looks at something that Otto Scharmer, my dear friend and colleague at the Club of Rome, would call shifting from an ecosystem to an ecosystem, shifting from the me to the we. That should be the way in which we look at unwavering ambition. An ambition to think about a society that services people, planet, and prosperity, to ensure that we're not eroding democracy by becoming egomaniacs that are only looking at profit, power, run by a patriarchy that is not thinking about anyone else but themselves. Someone just told me this morning that Google stocks have gone up by 45%. While people are suffering in the United States, we have the largest urban breakdown in the US than we've ever seen. There is something dysfunctional. So how do we get to that ecosystem? What does that look like concretely? Because it can't just be an alternative future that seems to be some kind of very far away niche opportunity. It needs to be driven by an understanding of the big elephants in the room. The first elephant in the room is the morality gap. What happened to a leadership that understood that actually a thriving society means thriving business? That an unthriving society is not good for business? What about wealth distribution? We have now across the global north a life satisfaction reduction rather than augmentation, even though we have more people that are making more money. We have less wealth distribution than we've ever seen. We need to tax the wealthy, and we need to tax, in particular, the profits coming from the type of economic behavior that we do not want. We need to understand that shareholder value is dictating everything. That when we have brave CEOs that do have unwavering ambition, that they are told that they cannot continue with that ambition because it is not bringing enough short-term profits. We need to think about extractive GDP economics that have been fundamentally based on productivity and not based on ensuring that we value education. The United States today, and this is what we call the American dream, 50% of American citizens have a literacy rate of 6th grade. What happened to the incredible education that I grew up with? The best education in the world was in California. We haven't placed a value on well-being. We haven't placed a value on access to health care. We need to look at climate discrimination, because while we have a poverty issue and an inequality issue, we also are seeing that it is the most vulnerable that are getting hit by climate change, and yet they are not the ones that hold the wealth and global well-being and the cost of inaction. The fact that actually we know that the cost of inaction is now surpassing the cost of action. So let me lead you through why we are doing all of this. Because the corollary of the 3 Ps, the power, the profit, and the penis effect, is now what I call the 3 Ms. Think about it. Why are those tech bros running now for the money? Predominantly, they are thinking about molecules and minerals to make sure that their AI revolution that is servicing them, is going to make as much money as possible. And this evening, I will be arguing on the debatable panel with the New York Times that actually AI is not regenerative. AI is degenerative, and focus predominantly on money for the few, not for the many. That is why global well-being has decreased so substantially, because that morality gap has shown us that GDP growth plus population growth plus climate change has reduced well-being and has increased high social tension. And you can see this in the work that we've done in our book, Earth for All, A Survival Guide for Humanity, where actually social tension has increased and average well-being has decreased. And if anyone's interested, at the bookstore, there are copies of our book in French and in English, and I'll be doing a signing, that's the little publicity stint, sorry, at about 12:15 this afternoon. Here's one of the major elephants in the room. As we unpack it, you can see that actually within country wealth distribution has recently been moving in the wrong direction. And we can see that the top 1% richest are really actually getting most of the wealth these days and accumulating that wealth and not being taxed on that wealth. If you've got Warren Buffett, who says that his secretary or housekeeper is actually paying more tax than himself, you know that there's a problem. But what's really important is to understand how much that has evolved since 1978 and the amount of social tension and distrust that we're seeing. And this picture is linked to the United States, where we can see that actually CEO salaries in the US since 1978 have grown by 1,460%, in comparison to employee salaries that have grown by 18%. Inflation, in parts, between 20 to 30%. So the fact of the matter is that we truly have a big problem here. Again, unwavering ambition for what purpose? And within this geopolitical world that is being determined by a tech bro society that wants less wealth distribution and more of the me culture rather than the we culture, how do we transition, working with the private sector, working with other governments to show that the American way is not the way? How can we show that actually we need to shift? Because again, if we are talking about climate, and we are here at a climate conference, the fact of the matter is that the CO2 responsibility is also on the shoulders of the wealthiest. And we know that fossil fuel companies make 2.8 billion windfall profits per day globally untaxed. And everybody is saying, hold on, just transition? The funds? Where do we get the funds? Where do we get the capital to go towards decarbonization? Too difficult. Hold on, the capital's right there. 2.8 billion per day. Just tax it. And then redistribute it. And then make sure that we start to enter into a very different relationship between the North and the South. Because again, the impact and cost of inaction is huge. All of the studies now that have been coming out just this past year, as we have hit 1.5 degrees, demonstrates that at 1.5 degrees, we will lose at least 3% global GDP this year. And that at 3 degrees, we could lose upwards of 10% global GDP, even 17 in the most vulnerable countries. So my question then is, if we are going to continue on a neoliberal path of traditional economics that is based on productivity, why would you do that? Because you know you're going to lose GDP anyway. So why not buffer your economy by measuring what matters? Starting to have a much more robust value chain that takes into consideration externalities. This is what our unwavering ambition should be. To understand how, number one, we preserve democratic governance, and that we meet basic human needs. Coming back to my example in San Francisco today and so many other urban centers across the globe that are reflections of the way in which we have totally disconnected the needs of people with our governments and the way in which they are governing. We need dignity for all, but we need to absolutely transform our economy from a GDP-based economy and an over-financialized economy where shareholder premise rules to an economy of well-being. We need to account for environmental and social risks and integrate that into our economic decision-making. This should be our unwavering ambition as a collective, as actors within the economy, and understanding that we have to tax the rich. This doesn't mean that profits are unacceptable, but it means that not being taxed for what you make is. We have to understand that there needs to be a link between what are public goods, what is ownership, and socialize the rewards of social and environmental social commons. Create just transition funds, universal basic dividend, and ensure that we actually bring people on this journey of transformation. That should be our unwavering ambition, to do this together. Ladies and gentlemen, but this means that we cannot just do it in the global north. It means that we have to change our relationship with the global south and correct the inequity between the north and the south. This has been created by outdated mechanisms under the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank. We need to look at debt cancellation, but we need to understand what are the structures to enable us to do that. And we need to think about special drawing rights and special mechanisms to enable the global south to thrive, to grow, but in a very different way. Again, that should be our unwavering ambition. And yet, on Monday, we were told that actually Trump has decided that we need to go back to GDP, we need to go back to the Bretton Woods, and the US has to have more control of the World Bank and the IMF. I'm almost finished, and I'm going to finish with this. We have to shift from a tech-bro patriarchy and increase the agency of women, youth, and workers to drive the economy and also our future. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have an alternative future. That alternative future is about a well-being economy. That alternative future is about reducing social tension. That alternative future is about the way in which we bring the private sector, companies, corporates together with people to understand how we build an economy of change for the people, for planet, for prosperity. Thank you very much. If we do not do this now, then when? Thank you.